Okay, so you're ready to learn more about climate finance, particularly in developing countries.
Sounds good.
All right, perfect. Well, for this deep dive, we're taking an excerpt from Understanding Climate Finance, Sources, Instruments, and Challenges.
Okay.
And one thing you'll realize pretty quickly is this whole idea of who gets the money
Mm-hmm.
and how it's actually used
Yeah,
is a lot more complicated than it might seem at first glance.
absolutely. Yeah, there's this kind of misconception that it's all just about like wealthy nations writing checks.
Right.
But the reality is it's a lot more complex than that.
Way more. So maybe let's just start with like the super basic question. What even is climate finance?
Yeah, so at its very basic level, climate finance is providing resources to address the climate crisis.
Okay.
On two main fronts, we talk about mitigation and we talk about adaptation.
Gotcha.
Mitigation is all about how to reduce future climate change.
Okay.
So you're thinking about things like shifting to renewable energy, bringing those emissions down. And then adaptation focuses on how we deal with the unavoidable impacts that we're already seeing.
So basically helping people adapt to a planet that's already changing and trying to prevent it from getting worse. A
Exactly.
two-pronged approach.
Yeah.
Now, our source mentions all these different funding sources,
Yeah.
and it's not just governments, is it?
No, it's a real mix. You've got public entities, private entities,
Uh,
national governments, international organizations like the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility.
Right.
You even have private investors, philanthropic foundations, all getting involved.
And the ways that they give the money, it's not just like, here's a grant.
No, absolutely not.
It's more creative than
It
that.
gets pretty interesting. You see green bonds, debt swaps, even things like debt for nature swaps.
That for nature swaps. That sounds kind of wild. How does that even work?
So imagine a country with a huge amount of debt, right?
Right here.
With a debt for nature swap, a big chunk of that debt is just forgiven.
By who?
Usually by the creditor, could be a developed nation or some big institution. Okay, but here's the catch. The country that gets the debt relief, they promise to put that same amount of money into conservation.
So, like, they might protect a rainforest with that money instead of paying back the debt.
Exactly. It tackles debt and helps the environment.
It's like a win-win.
Yeah, ideally.
So that's pretty cool.
Mm.
But it makes me think about this $100 billion pledge, the one where high-income countries said they'd give that much every year to developing nations.
Right.
Is that even happening?
Honestly, we're falling short.
Not really.
The latest numbers show we're not even close to the target.
Wow.
And there's a few reasons why. A big one is just political will. You also have this debate about what even counts as climate finance.
What do you mean?
Well, some countries are including loans and export credits in their calculations.
So it looks like they're giving more than they actually are.
Yeah, some people say it's a way to inflate the numbers.
So even when the money's there, getting it isn't easy, right?
Definitely not. The report specifically talks about Pakistan and asks whether all this money just goes to governments or can NGOs, other groups, actually benefit.
It's a good question.
Right. Imagine you're an NGO in Pakistan working directly with communities hit hardest by climate change
You're seeing the effects up close.
every single day.
You've got the knowledge, the solutions.
Just try getting your hands on that funding.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like there's a wall between the problem and the solution.
A wall of bureaucracy.
Exactly.
And this is a big issue in a lot of developing countries.
Where the systems maybe aren't as strong.
It's tough, especially for smaller organizations.
They don't have the same resources as the big players.
Exactly, they're at a disadvantage.
So what does all this mean for hitting those big climate goals we've set for ourselves? You know, having emissions by 2030, net zero by 2050.
If we're serious about this, we need to simplify the funding process.
Make it easier to get.
We have to. Otherwise, those smaller organizations, the ones doing crucial work on the ground, they'll keep getting left behind.
It's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about making sure the right people can actually use it.
Exactly. We need to support those local communities, those grassroots initiatives.
Because they're the ones closest to the issues.
They often have the best, most sustainable solutions, too.
That's a really important point. It makes you think about how we can design better systems.
Right. Systems that put local communities at the center of this fight.
That's something we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. It's time for real change. Change in how we think about and actually use climate finance.
Well, that was a great conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. It was a really important discussion.
And to all our listeners out there, keep thinking critically about these issues. And until next time, keep learning.